covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle. We deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture.
Right day. It is Tuesday, the 13th of May. You tuned into Channel Africa and welcome to Rise and Shine. My name is Asanda, Beda. Thank you for joining us if you've just done that, and if you've been with Channel Africa, well, stay with us. We're going to be with you until 9, and we want to say thanks to Jabunkolele as well for driving us with that amazing music until this point. So we are on DSTV Audio Bouquet, channel 802, on OpenView, channel 628. We're also on www.channelafrica.co.za. And if you've been following us, you'll be seeing that we've been live streaming on our various platforms. That's YouTube, on Facebook, as well as Instagram. We look forward to your views as well. Do find us on X at Channel Africa 1. It will be the same on Instagram as well as TikTok. And we'd love to hear from you in terms of what you think of our show. What's coming up in this hour of Africa Rise and Shine? We take a look at the South African government reacting to the group of Afrikaner nationals who took a decision to leave South Africa for the United States on refugee status, and Rwanda's President Paul Kagame calling for greater cooperation among African nations. Of course, those stories and more will be coming up on the show. Let's start by getting our news update, the first one for this Tuesday, with Jwalani Tulongwepe, and then Fikile Lingwati will follow with the sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Rwandan President Paul Kagame has called on all African countries to work together and deal with conflicts and coups on the continent. He says the African Union needs to do more to address the many challenges facing the continent. Speaking at the Africa CEO Forum in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, Kagame says regardless of the challenges, efforts must be made to find lasting peace.
In terms of peace and security, and you look at the whole continent, you find many trouble spots. All kinds of efforts going on, back and forth, succeeding in some places, not succeeding in others, and continued efforts going on. Again, these are some of the areas, because of the past and how we have handled our own affairs, that we are all of a sudden reminded that we can't do all things by ourselves.
South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister Ronald Lamola says the Afrikaner group that took a decision to leave for the US do not qualify for refugee status. The Trump administration made a decision to grant white Afrikaners who want to leave South Africa refugee status. Addressing the media in Pretoria on the country's preparedness on the main G20 summit in November, Lamola says all citizens in the country are treated equally.
From the perspective of the South African government, in terms of the executive orders that have defined the refugees, the South Africans as refugees, we have stated in the statement we issued on Friday that in line with the international definition, they do not qualify for that status, and there is no persecution of white African or South Africans in South Africa. This has been proven by a number of statistics in our country, including the police reports.
At least 130 civilians were killed by Burkina Faso's government forces and allied militia in March alone near the western town of Solenzo. Ahead of the Human Rights Watch report released yesterday, there were reports of more militant attacks over the weekend, with dozens of military and civilian casualties. About 40% of Burkina Faso was under the control of groups linked to Al-Qaeda, an Islamic State operating in West Africa's Sahel region. The attacks, in which thousands of people have been killed and millions displaced, have continued despite promises by the country's military leaders to deal with the insurgency. The HRW previously said the army was implicated in the killings. Britain's Prime Minister has used strong words while outlining plans to tighten up the immigration system in the UK. The proposed changes include a longer route to permanent residency. Keir Starmer said the country risked becoming an island of strangers unless immigration controls are strengthened.
Make no mistake, this plan means migration will fall. That's a promise. But I want to be very clear on this. If we do need to take further steps, if we do need to do more to release pressure on housing and our public services, then mark my words, we will.
A new report says the entire population of Gaza is at critical risk of famine after 19 months of conflict, mass displacement and the blockade of humanitarian aid. According to the Integrated Food Security Phase classification, a global hunger scale used by the UN and many aid agencies, 500,000 people in the territory are facing starvation. Israel has prevented any aid entering Gaza since early March, saying it's putting pressure on Hamas to release the remaining hostages. Beth Bechadal is the Deputy Director General at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations.
Certainly, while we've had the chance in the report to look back, the important part of what it does is look ahead at the period from May 11th through September. And in fact, over that period, we expect that all 2.1 million people, every single person in Gaza, will be in crisis or worse levels of food insecurity.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headlines, good morning, I'm Figile Lungwati. Bafana interim coach Molefi Ntseki is facing challenges in selecting the squad for the Africa Cup of Nations. They called Africa Nations Championship. Naomi Osaka has been eliminated from the Italian Open as the struggles for form at the top level continued. I will be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
So yesterday, one of our chats that we had was on Uganda's opposition leader, Bobi Wine, seeking presidency. A lot of comments coming from you as well as the group of Afrikaners from South Africa who are seeking refugee status in the U.S. But just touching on a few in a quick moment now before we get into our Africa Roundup. On X, Meweje Muzamir, talking on that Bobi Wine story, seeking presidency in Uganda, saying the next president of Uganda, protest vote come 2026. Also on that story, we have Kigongo Robert, who says, well received. Thanks for keeping an eye on Uganda. We greatly appreciate your role in amplifying the plight of the oppressed Ugandans and shaping public discourse. Giving all our flowers to you there. Thank you for your comments. And Wills Be Yourself saying he is our only hope. And then Drake Mutibwa saying he's the duly elected and legitimate president of Uganda. We're glad to again assert our voices through the ballot. Hashtag protest vote UG 2026. We'll read your comments as we get moments during the show because I know there's quite a few as well on YouTube. So thank you so much for getting in touch with us. At Channel Africa 1 is our handle across our social media platforms. Always great to hear from you. Let's get into our Africa Roundup now. This is when we look back at stories that made headlines yesterday or coming into the new week and what we can expect to be developing in terms of our continent and around our continent on this new day. We start with South Africa, where the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamula, says the Afrikaner group that took a decision to leave South Africa for the United States does not qualify for refugee status. The group arrived in the U.S. on Monday following the Trump administration's decision to grant them refugee status.
There is no persecution of white Afrikaners in South Africa on the basis of their race. What we have is a necessary program, which is a constitutional imperative, which has also been confirmed by many international organizations, including the Human Rights Council in Geneva, that the skewed land ownership in South Africa, there is a need for its transformation. There is a need for redistribution of land to reflect the demographics of our country. As you know, that almost the majority of our land is still in the hands of white people. So we will continue to clarify this aspect, and we will continue to engage with the U.S. government.
Kenyan President William Ruto has assured the country that all Kenyans reported missing under suspicious circumstances have been safely reunited with their families, emphasizing his administration's commitment to preventing enforced disappearances.
Kenyans must not, as has happened in the past, where Kenyans disappeared and their bodies were found in all manner of places, that will not happen under my administration. And all the people who disappeared or who were abducted in what you said, all of them have been brought back to their families and to their homes. And I have given clarity and firm instructions that nothing of that kind of nature will happen again, and that it was my commitment as I became president that extrajudicial disappearances of Kenyans will not be part of what we are doing as a nation.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame has called for greater cooperation among African nations and less dependence on external powers, urging the continent to set its own course during remarks at the Africa CEO Forum in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire.
There are many opportunities. We always talk about potential of our continent, but when do we realize really what this potential is all about in reality? I think that has always been the question, and that comes back to us as a continent, as a people of this continent, to take the bull by its horns and deal with the problem. So we can't keep depending on what others are saying or doing about us. We need to be working with each other and other countries on the global stage that offer what we need, and we as well offer what they need.
The African Travel Commission is calling for its members to endorse Gloria Guevara for Secretary General for the United Nations Tourism Organization post. 6 candidates are running for the leadership of the UN Tourism Organization. Institute of Cultural Diplomacy President and former Minister of Tourism in Zimbabwe, Walter Mzembi, tells us more.
We are endorsing Gloria because she has basically acquitted herself in the field of global tourism, first as Minister of State for Tourism for the Republic of Mexico during the time that we were ministers ourselves, myself, the likes of Martinez in South Africa, Derek Hanekom. She is a familiar figure and very competent in the field of tourism. And secondly, because she then ascended to the post of Chief Executive Officer of the private sector body, which is a partner to the UNWTO itself, UN Tourism, and that is the World Travel and Tourism Council. She was the chief executive of largely over 200 industry bodies.
That's how we come to the end of today's segment of the Africa Roundup. Let's take this moment at 13 minutes past 6 to thank the team on Africa Rise and Shine. On technical production, today is Mondli Mtambo. On production is Hlengiwe Mabaso and Joey Likhodi, as well as Pumuzo Ramakaza. On news is Jwalani Tulongwepe. Economics is Bontle Headbush. And on sports is Fikile Lingwati. Still to come, we take a look at what's making headlines in East Africa.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126, and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So yeah, that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk, it's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with a community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Jumuiya ya maendeleo ya kusini mwa Afrika SADC imeanza kuondoa vikosi vyake vya kulinda amani kutoka maeneo ya mashariki mwa Jamhuri ya Kidemokrasia ya Kongo DRC kupitia nchi ya Rwanda. Hii imekaje?
Kinachojionyesha sasa tayari jumuiya ya kusini mwa Afrika SADC imeanza kuelemewa kwanza na gharama kubwa za kuongoza operation za kijeshi kule mashariki mwa Kongo.
Hii inaleta tafsiri gani haswa katika nchi za Afrika ambazo ziko ndani ya machafuko hivi sasa? Hii inaleta tafsiri gani haswa kwa mataifa ya Afrika?
Cha kwanza kwenye diplomasia, tafsiri ya kwanza ni kutatua matatizo yao wao wenyewe. Mfano kinachoendelea Sudani Kusini, kinachoendelea Kongo, Rwanda, Uganda.
Darubini ya Afrika 11 kamili hadi 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Interracial relationships. And now you are based in the States and you are married to a beautiful white woman, white lady.
I learned that, for us in our culture, we literally can speak our mind. I remember when we started dating and whatnot, and, she picked up like a little bit of weight. And maybe me, I was like, oh, wow, you must be happy in this relationship because look at you. You look great. You're even picking up some weight. And she got really, really offended. And it took I think it was about a couple of hours before I could realize that, because I could tell that she was off after that. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. Until later when I was talking to her, I'm like, you're really, really off today. And then she expressed that, yeah, because you're telling me that I'm picking on some weight. And I'm like, in my culture, when you are gaining some weight, it means you're happy. Yes. So that's what I was trying to imply.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege.
Zochitika ndi madapiri kamlondola wazochitika pena paliponse.
Aphungu a nyumba ya malamulo mu dziko la Malawi akuchita zokambirana zawo pa zinthu zosiyanasiyana pambuyo pa nyumbayi kutsegulidwa masiku apitawo, ndipo kondani Nyamasa ukali nafe pompano chiyambireni aphungu akukambirana masiku apitawo ndi zovuta ziti zomwe zachitika mu nyumba imeneyi ya malamulo.
Ndingathe kunena kuti state of national address imene a president Dr. Lazarus Chakwera akhala kuipereka mnyumba ya malamulo imeneyi idautsa mpungwepungwe kwambiri nyumbayi, chifukwa pofika panopa mene ndikuyankhula pano ndiye kuti munafuna kubuka ndewu mnyumbayi. Leader of the house olemekezeka Richard Kimwendo Banda kuyimirira kuyankha koma mopsa mtima zimene amayankhula phungu oyimira ku Blantyre City South East Pasama Suleiman kunena kuti sona imene adapereka president pa 14 February ikuonetsa kuti palibe chilichonse cha zero chimene chidaperekedwa mu sona imeneyi, akuti imene ayichotse.
Zochitika ndi madapiri lolemba mpaka lachisanu pa nthawi ya 7 koloko kufikira 8 koloko madzulo pa Channel Africa.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's take a look at some of stories making headlines in East Africa now, and we're joined on the line by journalist and founder of Association of Grassroots Journalism Kenya, Dennis Beru. Dennis, good morning. Always great catching up with you. How's your Tuesday?
Thank you so much, Asanda. Unjani.
Nyapi lunjani wena.
Yeah, I'm well. I hope you are doing good in South Africa.
Absolutely, we are, and I hope you are doing well as well.
Yes.
Great stuff. Let's go to Uganda, where the opposition leader Bobi Wine is seeking presidency. 43-year-old, real name Robert Kyagulanyi. We had a lot of comments from this yesterday because we carried the story for the first time, and our viewers seem to be very, very glued onto developments there. He'll be running for the second time for this position. What are his prospects in a country ruled for about 40 years by the incumbent Yoweri Museveni?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Asanda. Bobi Wine's decision to seek again the presidency of Uganda is not good news for the people of Uganda, or rather the people of East Africa. But he has been at the forefront of trying to fight for what he terms as the freedom that the people of Uganda should be having. Remember, the current president Yoweri Museveni, who has been at the helm of the presidency for so many years. Bobi Wine term him as a dictator, and his time is up for the young generation to take over. And remember, this will be his second term or time running for presidency. Remember, he ran for presidency in 2021, but unfortunately, Bobi Wine didn't manage to win the presidency, and garnering around that 4% of the vote cast, that was equivalent to around 3 million votes against Yoweri Museveni's around 54% of the vote cast. That is approximately 5 million votes. Now the point is, how is he going now to bridge that gap during the last year's election? We are talking about 2 million votes, and remember, the chief or the command of the military in Uganda, that is Muhonzi, who is now the son to the president. The other day, he was mocking Bobi Wine, and but Bobi Wine says that the time is up for the young people of Uganda to stand up in their arms and vote the right people, especially the young people who will liberate them from poverty and things around freedom of democracy in Uganda.
Talking about wanting to garner support from a certain group of people, young people, as you say, he's also touched on the West, and he's criticized them or the region for not speaking out more against what he calls gross human rights violations in Uganda. Is this a case of lethargy on the part of the West, or a lack of awareness, do you think?
Yes, Sanda. You see, we know very well, or Bobi Wine know very well, that the West, that is the United States of America, should be at the forefront of trying to put pressure on Museveni to end forceful arrest and detention, because we've seen the longest opposition leader, that is Kizza Besigye, has been in detention for quite a number of months now, and the people of Uganda feel that his rights is being violated, and in the eyes of the West, Africa Union, and other bodies. And Bobi Wine sees U.S. is not taking any action in terms of trying to put pressure on Museveni so that he can at least now minimize or stop the arrest, forceful arrest, and arresting people, just putting them in jail without any charges against these individuals. And we've seen quite a number of the Ugandans being arrested, the activists. For example, the PA to Bobi Wine was arrested and is still in jail. Of course, Kizza Besigye is still in jail. Remember, Uganda is a close ally of the West, especially the United States of America, the current president, that is Donald Trump. And people feel that, Donald Trump, you must act, you must say something about, the human violation that is taking place in Uganda.
As you talk about Donald Trump, the U.S., let's move on to this story now so we can cover other areas that need to be covered. The United States has rejected an appeal by the United Nations to help fund the African Union's new peacekeeping mission in Somalia. What are the reasons given?
Of course, the funding or the rejection of the U.S. That is now the funds to the peacekeepers or the peacekeeping mission in Somalia. This is a major blow to African Union, and of course we have a number of countries that have their troops stationed in different parts of Somalia, who are now trying to make sure that Somalia is stable. And of course, it is a very big blow for this mission in Somalia, because remember, the United States has been at the forefront of trying to make sure that there is a stability, not only a political stability, but there is peace in the entire Horn of Africa. And the past regime, that is Joe Biden, has been really a big supporter of the AMISOM. And remember, the mandate of AMISOM came to an end, and now the mission, the new mission, going to United States, meeting the U.S. representative on foreign affairs and security issues, trying to tell them that we need money so that we can continue with our mission. Of course, there is a rejection.
So where can the UN now launch its appeal after this rejection? What will they do next?
Of course, they have appealed. I see whether their appeal might be listened to. But remember, they either like it or not, we must have a stability, or Somalia, which has been at war with a jihadist group, and the Al-Shabaab, that is now the Al-Shabaab wing, for so many years.
And I mean, at the end of the day, the African Union's efforts, and the African Union's efforts and the pursuit of, the peace negotiations in Somalia needs to be carried forward. So one remains to see what that is going to be like in terms of the new appeal that the UN could now make after this rejection. Let's go to Congo or Burundi, because Congolese refugees are arriving in Burundi, being driven by intensifying fighting. The UN's refugee agency, UNHCR, saying that this is the largest they've seen in terms of refugees from Congo coming in to Burundi. Where are they being told to live, as they are reportedly not allowed in certain areas?
Yes, Congo, Rwanda issue is a very interesting one, because I remember there are so many Congolese who are trying to flee the rebel-controlled region, that is the eastern part of DR Congo, that is Kivu, that is Goma, Bukavu. And of course, the huge number of refugees who are trying to seek refuge in the neighboring country, that is Burundi. They're now being dealt, with a lot of, hardship. There are no basic services. I remember in so many years, Burundi has never received, such number of people, refugees, trying to seek refuge in Burundi, and of course the conflict has been escalated. Remember, people thought of there is a sort of a ceasefire that was agreed a few weeks ago, but nothing is being done to ensure that people return back to their homes and continue their lives. And remember, Burundi is one of the poorest countries in the world, and not only in the world, Africa. Yeah. And they cannot accommodate such huge number of refugees. Remember, having 70,000 or over 70,000 refugees at the same time, it might be a big issue. And remember, most of these refugees who are trying to move from the said region that is being controlled by M23, and also the fighting that is ongoing with the Congolese army. They cannot afford basic services,
so
like
it is quite a dire
owning
situation
or
there.
paying. Of course, yes. And this is going to be a very big issue, because remember, there were some U.S. funding cuts by USAID, and USAID were really supporting some of the refugees intervention in these countries and in this region. So it is a major blow for the refugees, and some of them have started returning back
today,
home, and others going to Bujumbura. Yeah.
We'll leave it there for now. Asante sana. We're completely out of time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Founder of Association of Grassroots Journalism Kenya, Dennis Beru there, giving us analysis on our East Africa wrap. 32 minutes past 6 Central African time. Let's get news headlines from Jalani Tulo.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, U.S. President Donald Trump has again erroneously stated that there is a genocide happening in South Africa as justification for his executive order allowing white Afrikaners who claim discrimination to acquire an expedited path to citizenship in the United States. Rwandan President Paul Kagame has called on all African countries to work together and deal with conflicts and coups on the continent. He says the African Union needs to do more to address the many challenges facing the continent. And finally, the Israeli-American hostages Eden Alexander has been freed by Hamas and taken by the Red Cross to Israeli forces in Gaza. The 21-year-old's family was waiting to greet him. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get the latest from the world of sports. Our first update now for Rise and Shine. Here's Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you and good morning, Asanda. We begin with football news this hour. The 2025 African Nations Championship Chan tournament will be co-hosted by Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. The event takes place between the 2nd and the 30th of August. South Africa secured qualification after beating Malawi 2-0 in the second leg qualifier over the weekend. Coach Mulefintseki talks about the possible challenges in selecting the squad for the tournament.
The Chan tournament player selection is a very difficult one, because if ever you are looking at I'm just going to make this example. If you're looking at Victor Letswalo to say he's my key striker in the team, and then when the season starts and then they go into pre-season, the club might say the player's not ready for a competition like that, a tournament competition. So we are looking at every player, whether he's playing or he's not playing.
The Kaizer Chiefs DDC player Aiden McCarthy has become a key part of Ntseki's Chan squad. He anchored the defense alongside Gwanda Mgonyama in the qualifiers. Ntseki is impressed by McCarthy's development.
The time I spent at Kaizer Chiefs, Aiden was promoted to the first team. He worked under Coach Arthur, and then he worked also with me. And Aiden was a very integral part of the DDC team that recently won championship in the DDC. And Aiden, for the past month, has been training with the first team. When we sent the call-up letter to Kaizer Chiefs to release Aiden Putsani and Samke Lozwane, the club refused because they were looking forward to prepare for the Nedbank Cup. But fortunately, I had a chat with Coach Nabi, and then he agreed to say, I will release the players if...
Cricket news. India batter Virat Kohli announced his retirement from Test cricket, bringing down the curtain on a sparkling career in the longest format just days after Captain Rohit Sharma did the same. Kohli, who made his debut in 2011 and scored 30 centuries and 9,230 runs at an average of 46.85 overs, 123 tests, is expected to remain available for one-day internationals. The 36-year-old quit 2020 internationals immediately after India won their second 20 overs World Cup trophy in the West Indies last year. Naomi Osaka was eliminated from the Italian Open after beaten by Peyton Stearns 6-4, 3-6, 7-6 and 7-4 tie as the struggles for form at the top level continued. In the quarterfinals, Stearns will face Daniela Collins, who knocked out the reigning champion Iga Swiatek or Elena Svitolina after coming through an attritional match which lasted 2 hours and 43 minutes on a baking center court. Osaka is another big name that American Stearns has beaten in Rome after also knocking out 5th seed Madison Keys in the previous round. Former world number 1 Osaka has looked a long way from what a player who has won 4 Grand Slams since returning last year from a 15-month break from tennis for the birth of her daughter. And Italy will get their chance and defense for the Billie Jean King Cup underway with a quarterfinal against host China in September following the draw in Shenzhen. If they win that one, Jasmine Paolini's team, who won their 5th title in the women's team event last year by defeating Slovakia in the final in Malaga, will face Ukraine or Spain in the semi-finals. On the other side of the draw, the quarterfinals will pit the United States against Kazakhstan and Japan against Great Britain. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figure.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
President Paul Kagame says the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo lacks the political will to resolve the long-running insurgency in the east of the country. Kagame has criticized the recent peace talks, which he termed a mere photo opportunity. Kagame denied reports that Rwanda is supporting M23 rebels accused of capturing the DRC territories.
Labeling the DRC president as unwillingness to solve the problem, this is just such a joke. When you listen to his statement, he is backing exactly the same thing the rebels are demanding. When we look at their statement, we see correlation between what Kagame is saying and what the leaders of the M23 rebels are demanding.
That's Didier Bayeye, who is a political analyst.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
All right, Sierra Leone's largest diamond miner halts almost all its operations. Let's get the details from Bundle Headbush as she gives us the latest business news.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you. Good morning. In our first look at the business news this morning, Sierra Leone's largest diamond producer, Koidu Limited, has halted operations and laid off nearly its entire local workforce of more than 1,000 employees following a protracted dispute over pay and working conditions. Workers at the mine went on strike in December 2024 but suspended their walkout to allow negotiations. They then walked out again in early March. President of the Koidu Limited Workers Union, Charles Kainesi, says that workers had only been receiving 30% of the value of their salaries because they were pegged to the US dollar but paid in the local currency, and the company was using an exchange rate from 2016. South African rail company Transnet says the turnaround of the entity will largely rely on its engineering division as an original equipment manufacturer. Transnet will soon launch a rolling stock leasing company called LeaseCo and is also diversifying into the supply of components to make up for the failed Chinese locomotive deal. The entity believes the efforts will return it to financial profitability in the coming financial year. Besi Mabunda is the Transnet Engineering Chief Executive.
We did issue a request for information at the beginning of the year, and this has closed in March. So basically what that is seeking to do is, given that we had unsolicited approaches, we want to formalize this and to see if there are entities out there that have access to spares, which are either replacement components for the CRRC parts.
Exhibitors from across the globe say they're excited and ready for the start of this year's edition of Africa's Travel Indaba in Durban in KwaZulu-Natal province. Over 1,300 exhibitors are expected to participate in the three-day summit. Chris Mears from the United Kingdom is the director of African Travel and Tourism Association.
We are the largest private sector exhibitor on the show floor, and we're looking forward to a fantastic Indaba, giving great opportunity for our over 800 members across the African continent to connect with quality buyers from around the world who are looking at selling Africa and enhancing the profile of Africa.
South Africa's Gauteng provincial government says it's not yet in a position to confirm whether its budget will be maintained or withdrawn ahead of a third attempt at tabling the national budget next week. Gauteng MEC for Finance and Economic Development, Lebogang Maile, has announced that the provincial government underspent by $98 million by the end of the 2024-2025 financial year. Maile says all finance MECs and the finance minister are scheduled to meet at a budget council today to discuss budget plans ahead of Enoch Godongwane's budget announcement. Maile was addressing the media in Johannesburg.
What is called the budget council. So the Minister of Finance and all MECs of Finance, we will be meeting and we will know whether they will cut any budgets on our part or whether there is going to be any changes, and that will determine whether we leave this budget as is or we amend it.
Oil prices have eased from a 2-week high this morning, weighed down by concerns about rising supplies. This is despite earlier optimism over the pause in the US-China trade war after both countries temporarily cut tariffs. Brent crude futures dropped 22 US cents or 0.3% to $64.74 per barrel earlier this morning, after having closed at 1.5% higher yesterday. Analysts say the gains yesterday were as a result of the United States and China agreeing to slash steep tariffs for at least 90 days, but that there was still lingering uncertainty over what happens in 90 days. Taking a look at our indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 604. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 44. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 435, and in Zambia, it's at 26 kwacha 61. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 reals 67, 81 rubles 40. India, it's 84 rupees 86. China, it's 7 yuan 21. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 18 rand 26. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound, and 89 to the euro. Looking at our commodities, gold is trading at $3,234 and platinum at $984 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $64.73 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Bontle Hetbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
And it's time for your G20 fact of the morning. Did you know that the G20 has no permanent secretariat? Unlike the UN or the World Bank, the G20 doesn't have a fixed headquarters or a permanent staff. Instead, it operates on a rotating presidency, with each host country setting the agenda and managing logistics for the year. And that's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa. Championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
6:45 Central African Time. Let's talk Africa's premier tourism showcase. It's the Africa's Travel Ndaba. We spoke about this yesterday. It's officially underway in Durban, South Africa. The 3-day trade show is preceded by the Business Opportunity Networking Day, better known as Bond Day. It's a space for knowledge exchange, thought leadership, and setting the tone for deals to be made on the trade floor. Our reporter Lebogang Mabange has more from the Inkosi Albert Luthuli International Convention Center.
From discovery to connection and growth, the Bond Day has returned with a powerful message and renewed energy. Industry leaders, tourism professionals and stakeholders gathered in Durban to explore the future of African tourism. The Chief Executive Officer of South African Tourism, Nombulelo Guliwe, opened the day by emphasizing the importance of knowledge sharing and global collaboration.
Today is about travel and tourism knowledge sharing. You know, nothing is as powerful as information, as engaging and sharing experiences. So I hope we'll use the next couple of hours to do just that. You'll also hear, as Carol said, global best practices, learn from global tourism trailblazers and explore innovations transforming the tourism global landscape.
The Bond Day is not just a precursor to the trade exhibition, it is a strategic platform where conversations ignite ideas. Dr. Gregory Davids, chairperson of the South African Tourism Board, described Bond Day as a collaborative space that goes beyond professionals, one that inspires vision.
We come together at Bond Day not only as professionals, but as visionaries and thought leaders to shape the next chapter of the African tourism. Bond Day is our shared space. It is an opportunity for reflection, for knowledge sharing, and the co-creation of knowledge. These 3 days, and particularly today, is quite important.
Dr. Davids also reminded delegates that Africa's Travel Ndaba is more than just an industry gathering, it's a force for transformation.
It is this interaction, in my view, of public and private, local and global, that gives Ndaba the credibility to influence, inspire and impact on the tourism ecosystem locally and abroad. Africa Travel Ndaba is much, much more than only an exhibition. It's a catalyst. This is where trade meets transformation.
Among the inspiring voices on the Bond Day stage was Africa's first female dredge master, Captain Londiwe Ngobo, who urged delegates to connect with their business purpose before showcasing it to the world.
We've been told that we're here to discover, to connect, and to grow. And if we're here to discover, I hope that before you even represent your company, you remember these two questions. before others can discover your business, have you truly discovered it? Have you truly? Because I'll be speaking to you, not the walls, as we connect. What is the heartbeat of your offering? And does it still align with why you started?
As the tourism industry rebuilds and adapts post-COVID, the Bond Day sets the tone for the deals, partnerships, and innovations expected over the next 3 days. From here, it's all about showcasing Africa's diversity and tourism potential to the global market. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in the KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says that his administration will continue to push for transformation in the country. Speaking at the Africa CEO Forum in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, President Ramaphosa says that the 49 white Afrikaners who left for the US are not facing any persecution in South Africa. President Donald Trump's administration is offering refugee status to some white South Africans that he claims are facing discrimination. The South African government has criticized the program, describing it as politically motivated. President Trump himself said he doesn't care which color is persecuted. As long as they're persecuted, he'll welcome them. Bonolo Maribe has more.
We've raised our own concern because those people who are being enticed to go to the United States do not fit the definition of a refugee. A refugee is someone who has to leave their country out of fear of political persecution, religious persecution, or economic persecution.
President Ramaphosa has broken his silence and claims that no one is being persecuted in South Africa. He has been reacting to the 49 Afrikaners who have left for the US under the Trump's administration refugee program.
They don't fit that description. And I had a conversation with President Trump on the phone, and he said, what's happening down there? And I said, President, what you've been told by those people who are opposed to transformation back home in South Africa is not true. And I added to him, I said, we were well taught by Nelson Mandela and other iconic leaders like Oliver Tambo on how to continue to build a united nation.
Ramaphosa has also used this working visit in Côte d'Ivoire to highlight that South Africa is ready for the G20 summit.
We are excited as South Africa and very privileged to be heading the G20 for the very first time on the African continent, and we're particularly pleased that our own continent as a whole through the AU is now a member and will be participating fully as we get the world to discuss our priorities and our theme, which is solidarity, equality as well. And as we do all that, we expect that our key priorities will become top of mind in the discussions that are currently taking place leading up to the Leaders Summit in November.
The South African president says that the African continent must strive for peace, especially where there are conflicts.
The processes that have been happening on the continent, either the Nairobi process, the Rwanda process, AU process, have been very, very essential in building a foundation of peacemaking and also confidence building, up to and including agreements that have been reached for a ceasefire between the belligerents, up to and including the withdrawal of, say, the SADC forces.
Meanwhile, Rwandan President Paul Kagame has called on all African countries to work together and deal with conflicts and coups on the continent.
In terms of peace and security, and you look at the whole continent, you find there are many trouble spots, all kinds of efforts going on, back and forth, succeeding in some places, not succeeding in others, and continued efforts going on. Again, these are some of the areas, because of the past and how we have handled our own affairs, that we are all of a sudden reminded that we can't do all things by ourselves.
President Ramaphosa hopes to consolidate bilateral ties with Côte d'Ivoire. The host of this year's Africa CEO Forum is one of South Africa's strategic partners in West Africa. Bonolo Maribe in Johannesburg.
South Africa's National Dialogue Preparatory Committee believes that the resolutions that will emanate from the blueprint of the National Compact will chart a new path for South Africa's unity project. The 30-year plan of action will be the roadmap that takes the country forward for the next 3 decades and will address social, economic, governance and constitutional issues. The committee briefed the media on the process leading up to the national dialogue, starting off with the national convention that will take place in 2 months' time. Last year, former President Thabo Mbeki made a clarion call for the country to hold a national dialogue to redefine South Africa's future. Sbahle Mota reports.
The National Dialogue Preparatory Committee hopes to get the country on a path of renewal. The committee, which comprises of the country's various foundations, are hard at work, engaging every sector of society in the build-up to the national dialogue, ensuring it as a citizen-led process supported by but not directed by government. Subcommittee Content Development National Dialogue Chair Oyama Mabandla says he hopes the resolutions coming out of the national dialogue must be binding.
It is certainly our desire that it is. In fact, earlier engagements on this, with government suggested that there was support for that, but there's been no conclusive agreement on that. Be that as it may, because this will be a popular enterprise, it will be a popular participation. Our people, in all walks of life, will proclaim and pronounce on the South Africa they want. That is what will inform the National Compact. And having pronounced on the South Africa they want, we believe that they should fight for. They should fight for that which they have proclaimed. So to the extent that government, does not want to honor the popular will, the people must demand it.
The committee outlined the process leading up to the national dialogue. The first convention is expected to be held in July and will be attended by 1,000 delegates. Thereafter, district and sectorial dialogues will take place from September to December. Deputy Chairman of the Foundation Preparatory Committee, Lindy Wegard, elaborates.
After the process of the district and sectorial dialogues, those will roll up from the bottom up into provincial reports, and those provincial reports will then roll up into a national report. In March of 2026, we then come to the final convention. And the two outcomes that we anticipate from that final convention is a national compact and a 30-year plan of action, which we hope, will be the roadmap that takes the country forward for the next 30 years, looking at social, economic, governance, and constitutional issues.
Asked on the 49 Afrikaners who departed for the United States, CEO of the Steve Biko Foundation, Nkosinathi Biko, questioned the wisdom of their move.
I don't think we should mistake the national dialogue to be a space that is going to be about creating a kumbaya moment. It's going to have to handle very difficult conversations, including the inequities that we see in our country and the narratives that go with them. And I think it's clear to many South Africans, and many, in fact, who are Afrikaners, that it is annoying to misrepresent the situation in South Africa.
The final convention is expected to take place in March 2026. I am Sibahle Mota in Pretoria.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
6:58 Central African Time, and very good morning to you if you are joining us. So we're about to get into the second hour of the program, but it's a Tuesday. which is just one of those days, isn't it? Doesn't often get much glory, the Tuesday of the week.
Yeah, nobody talks about Tuesday. And then we care again when it's Wednesday, because now it's halfway through the week. And then, of course, Thursday's weekend for a lot of people. They don't wait for Friday. They call Thursdays weekends.
But it's quite a thing how people reacted to some of our stories yesterday.
Yeah, very interesting. A lot of comments on Uganda's opposition leader, Bobby Wine, wanting to run for the second time for presidency, as well as the group of Afrikaners from South Africa who are seeking refuge or refugee status in the US. A lot of your comments came through on those.
I listened to President Trump a short while ago, and he said, I don't care what color they are, what ethnicity they are. If they're being persecuted and a lot of terrible things are happening there, a lot of terrible bad things are happening, people are being killed, genocide, and I don't know. We'll look at it again a little bit later. But right now, though, it is time for your news as we say good morning once again to
Jwalane Tulongwepe, and then Fikile Lingwati has our sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. US President Donald Trump has again erroneously stated that there is a genocide happening in South Africa as justification for his executive order allowing white Afrikaners who claim discrimination to acquire an expedited path to citizenship in the United States. Trump was responding to a question about why 49 Afrikaners are being allowed to enter the US while virtually all refugee admissions for people fleeing famine and wars in countries like Sudan and the DRC have been halted. President Trump made these comments.
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, we're supposed to have a G20 meeting there or something, but we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of, but it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about. But it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa.
Meanwhile, South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister, Ronald Lamola, says the Afrikaner group that took that decision to leave for the US do not qualify for refugee status. Addressing the media in Pretoria on the country's preparedness on the main G20 summit in November, Lamola says all citizens of the country are treated equally.
From the perspective of the South African government, in terms of the executive orders that have defined the refugees, the South Africans as refugees, we have stated in the statement we issued on Friday that in line with the international definition, they do not qualify for that status, and there is no persecution of white African or South Africans in South Africa. This has been proven by a number of statistics in our country, including the police reports.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame has called on all African countries to work together and deal with conflicts and coups on the continent. He says the African Union needs to do more to address the many challenges facing the continent. Speaking at the Africa CEO Forum in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, Kagame says regardless of the challenges, efforts must be made to finding lasting peace.
In terms of peace and security, and you look at the whole continent, you find many trouble spots, all kinds of efforts going on, back and forth, succeeding in some places, not succeeding in others, and continued efforts going on. Again, these are some of the areas, because of the past and how we have handled our own affairs, that we are all of a sudden reminded that we can't do all things by ourselves.
At least 130 civilians were killed by Burkina Faso government forces and allied militia in March alone near the western town of Solenzo. Ahead of the Human Rights Watch report released yesterday, there were reports of more militant attacks over the weekend, with dozens of military and civilian casualties. About 40% of Burkina Faso is under the control of groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State operating in West Africa's Sahel region. The attacks, in which thousands of people have been killed and millions displaced, have continued despite promises by the country's military leaders to deal with the insurgency. The HRW previously said the army was implicated in the killings. The Israeli-American hostage Eden Alexander has been freed by Hamas and taken by the Red Cross to Israeli forces in Gaza. The 21-year-old's family was waiting to greet him. The dual national was transferred to a military base in Israel where he'll undergo medical checks. The BBC's Lucy Williamson has the details.
Eden Alexander was handed over to the Red Cross behind closed doors. But the release of this single Israeli-American soldier speaks volumes about the new pressures playing across the Middle East. Hamas, under growing strain from Israel's 2-month blockade of humanitarian aid, is gambling on American goodwill to help push Israel into fresh negotiations on ending the war. After speaking to US President Donald Trump today, Israel's Prime Minister said he was sending a delegation to talks in Qatar, but insisted that fighting in Gaza would continue.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headlines, Fighting Amajida have reached the AFCON semi-finals and qualify for the Under-20 World Cup. Rain soaks the first practice day ahead of the 107th PGA Championship. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has called for greater cooperation among African nations and less dependence on external powers, urging the continent to set its own course. He was speaking at the Africa CEO Forum 2025 in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. The two-day forum has gathered public and private decision makers with the objective of building a new pact to fast-track the continent's economic transformation. Tlantla Mahlangu reports.
The Africa CEO Forum opened in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, with the presidential panel, including South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and Rwandan President Paul Kagame, amongst others. The forum is the largest platform of the African private sector and brings together decision makers throughout the continent and the diaspora. The 2025 edition is focusing on forging a new public-private deal to reshape the continent's prospects, bringing together over 2,000 leaders from more than 90 countries. Speaking during a presidential panel discussion on the first day of the forum, Rwandan President Paul Kagame stated that there's a need for greater cooperation amongst African nations.
We always talk about potential of our continent, but when do we realize really what this potential is all about in reality? I think that has always been the question. And that comes back to us as a continent, as a people of this continent, to take the bull by its horns and deal with the problem. So we can't keep depending on what others are saying or doing about us. We need to be working with each other and other countries on the global stage that offer what we need, and we as well offer what they need.
Discussions at the forum are structured around three key priorities: strengthening economic governance to improve public policy efficiency and enabling a more strategic government approach, optimizing public policy by aligning regulations with the needs of African businesses, and accelerating the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area to build a continental market and foster African champions. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says the AfCFTA is an engine of growth, and through it, the private sector has to embrace it and participate in it.
What it does, it gives the African continent an opportunity to integrate, and it gives business people the opportunity to see the 1.4 billion people market on our continent and a GDP of the entire continent adding up to $3.4 trillion. Now, with this agreement, we're then able to get the private sector working with the public sector to embark on meaningful projects such as infrastructure, because for trade to have meaning and to happen on our continent, infrastructure projects must be embarked upon, roads must be built, our airlines must work properly, our ports must work properly, our rail network must work properly. And this is where the private sector can then come and partner with the public sector, where we can work together. And the public sector is keen, having established or inaugurated the African Continental Free Trade Area, in integrating the continent.
The presidential panel also included Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Ghazouani and Ivorian Vice President Yemoko Meillet Gone. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ntlandla Mahlangu.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, we go to the DRC now, where 100 people have been confirmed dead and many others are still missing following devastating flash floods and landslides in the South Kivu province of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the worst hit area is the Kalehe territory, where torrential rains have caused rivers to overflow, sweeping away entire homes, schools and farmlands. Well, to help us unpack the humanitarian impact and the situation on the ground there, we're now joined by our journalist in the DRC, Jimmy Shukrani Bakonera. Jimmy, thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program. Hello, Jimmy, are you there? Hello, Jimmy, are you there? All right, we seem to be having a problem with the line to the DRC. We'll try continue to pick him up. But yeah, this tragedy sadly is yet another reminder of the issues that the DRC is vulnerable to, climate change related disasters in particular. And this, of course, is on top of the instability in that region, political and insurgency, where people are being displaced not just by war, sadly, but also now by the weather, and the impact there that it's having on the ground can only be immense. So we're hoping to, as I said, go to the DRC to try and get a little bit more and get the latest updates on the situation in the country from our reporter on the ground. But it doesn't look good for Congolese people in that part of the country. If war wasn't enough, the disruption and people losing their lives through war, here now we have at least 100 people being reported killed by these floods, and homes being washed away. But we'll try and catch you up with that story once we get through to the DRC.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Africa's healthcare systems face mounting pressures from policy uncertainty, growing inequalities and economic constraints. The 2025 Board of Healthcare Funders, or BHF conference, is convening the region's foremost healthcare leaders, clinicians and innovators to chart a more sustainable path forward. The 4-day event is expected to explore how multi-sectoral partnerships, innovative financing and bold leadership can reshape South Africa and the region's healthcare for the better. To bring us to speed on the conference, we're joined on the line now by Moraki Mukhosana, a board member of the Board of Healthcare Funders and CEO of Bomade in Botswana. And we'll take a break first before we get to that chat as they are on the line. This is Africa Rise and Shine.
Hey there, this is Palesa Tau, part of the dynamic duo that gives you on the move right here on Channel Africa from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Africa time. Well, it's with your help for the past 2 years that we have been a multi-award winning show.
Finally, yeah, we're keeping it on the move in 2025. And yes, I'm the other half of the duo, Benjamin Mushatama, and we're going to keep you going with the great conversations. Turn it up.
Okay. On the Move comes back in 2025 to give you more of the content that made us a Maldo and to deliver that bold, boundary-pushing content that you love. And of course, giving you a ride through the 3 hours of news, views, and entertainment.
Every weekday from 9 to midday Central African time, right here on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Cool.
Let's go.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Stay with us on Rise and Shine as we give you stories in and around the continent that you need to know. And that BHF conference, Board of Healthcare Funders Conference, is a chat we're going to be having later on. Right now, though,
yeah, we focus our attention on the world of tourism. And South Africa's Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, will deliver the opening address at this morning's official launch of the exhibition floor at the Africa Travel Indaba, which is taking place in Durban in KwaZulu-Natal, and that's on the east coast of South Africa. The event gathers tourism professionals from around the world, offering exciting prospects for Africa's tourism industry. Well, to discuss Zambia's participation and its role in this vibrant event, we're now joined by the country's Minister of Tourism, Rodney Sikumba. A very good morning to you, Minister. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning, Ayanda. Thank you so much for inviting me to an early morning program. What a way to start the day.
Zikomo kwambiri, muli bwanji?
Fantastic. I'm very good at the language.
There you go. We travel quite a bit. So, Zambia, why are you at this travel endeavor? What gems do you have to offer the world?
Well, I think what is very important for me, Peter, is we, as Africa, we're looking at collaboration, regional, continental collaboration. And I think for the very first time, we want to showcase what the African continent has to have with regards to tourism. And of course, what we've seen over a period of time is, for us as Zambia, is just to showcase our products and services that we offer within the tourism sector. And we're very delighted that we have the unique Museo Tunya, the Victoria Falls, as most people would know it. We have wildlife. And indeed, the warmth of the people. I believe when you travel Zambia, you actually notice how warm the people of Zambia are. So that's pretty much what we're putting up for the taking.
So tell us a little bit about this regional cooperation you were talking about, because often people will arrive and they'll decide Victoria Falls is something I want to see, Museo Tunya. And then is there a way that you're working together that you say, if you arrive on the Zambian side, also go to Zimbabwe?
Absolutely. And I think this is something that I'll take advantage to talk about on this particular program. You see, the natural resource, the Museo Tunya, is actually co-owned by Zambia and Zimbabwe. And we always use this, I personally use this analogy. I say, look, if you're looking at the Victoria Falls, it depends on which side you're looking. It's like a woman. Either you're looking at her from the front or from the back. Sorry to use that. But ultimately, it's one shared resource which we should actually sweat as the two countries. And I'm very delighted, Peter and Ayanda, that this time around, the Victoria Falls has actually gotten back to its glory days. Yes, we were faced with the dreaded drought ever experienced in our history, or at least for as I have lived on this earth. But one thing for sure is climate change is real. And as we to sweat this particular asset that we have. It's very, very important that we co-market this asset. And I want to just publicly state that my colleague Minister of Tourism Zimbabwe and myself have been working tirelessly to see how best we could increase visitors to that particular site so that it can benefit both countries, as it were.
What are you doing to incentivize buyers, international buyers, to go sell the story of Zambia? How are you making it easier for them to be able to offer the country as one of their products?
Well, I think, let me put it this way. You see, for buyers themselves, we have to essentially have targeted meetings with them. And when we talk about targeted meetings, these are pretty much engagements that we have whenever we go for our trade shows across Africa, across the globe. And as we identify these buyers, then we create what we call our farm trips, where these buyers are actually become familiar with the that we have. Now, Peter, and I just want to indicate to you that in as much as the buyers come through in terms of having to see what we have to offer as a country, it's also important to bring them up to speed with some of the initiatives that we as government are putting in place to make it relatively easy for a tourist to actually visit our country. Now, what is very key for us is infrastructure. I strongly believe that if the infrastructure is not right, it becomes extremely difficult for people to actually access your country. In this case, we're talking about airports. We're talking about facilities within the natural resources, which is obviously the national parks. We're talking about infrastructure around the many waterfalls that we have in our country. And as such, we have actually seen that with these buyers themselves, they would come through and see how best, in as much as they'd love to see what they see, rather, it's also important that they also understand how easy it is to access the country. So, top of our agenda within the African continent, Peter, I will tell you, connectivity is one thing which is very key. It's 10 times more difficult to travel Africa than it is in Europe. So it's top of agenda in the discussions that we're having for this year, at least. Then we're also talking about issues to do with visas. I'll speak for Zambia for now. In terms of Zambia, when I got into the office, we were sitting at about 53 countries only who were able to access free visas into the country. As we speak today, as of January, we are talking about 167 countries, which for us, deliberate ploy to make it easy for the tourists to come into the country. So we want also our African country colleagues to actually follow suit. Today's digital age can allow people to be pre-screened as opposed to having to apply for a visa from your country of residence and then eventually you're being rejected, which I strongly believe is not fair.
Talking about visas, they say charity begins at home. Africa is home for all of us on the continent. Is it possible for any African on the continent to arrive visa-free or at least get a visa on arrival?
I missed you there for a bit.
I was just saying that charity begins at home across the African continent. We are all African. Is it possible to arrive in Zambia visa-free or at least get a visa on arrival?
Absolutely, and that's what we're championing. So most of the African countries actually access visa on arrival. I can safely tell you that I can use my two hands to just mention the countries which would require a pre-application for visas. So we did that for Africa, and we are strongly working with our ministries of foreign affairs and that of Home Office to see how best we could increase. Ultimately, my desire and the desire of my president, Mr. Arende Chilema, is to be able to allow all the 54 African countries, or excluding ourselves, that is, to access Zambia with relative ease.
Minister, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for your time. And I've got to say that I've experienced Musa Tunya on both sides, because I think to get the full experience, you do have to do the Zimbabwean and the Zambian side. And it's so good that there's ease of travel in between the two on the day that you visit. So thanks so much indeed for telling us about Zambia, and we wish you the best of luck at the travel endeavor.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm looking forward to hosting you yet again in Zambia, so to see exactly how much developed the country has been, especially for the city of Livingstone, which houses Msotunya.
Fantastic. Thanks so much indeed. That's Zambia's Minister of Tourism, Rodney Sekumba. And
Hello, Africa. We would love to hear your voice on our radio station. Be part of the fun and send a shout out or greeting message to your loved ones and your favorite Channel Africa presenters. Whether you're in Africa, the diaspora, or anywhere else around the globe, we want to hear your voice. Send your shout out message by sending an email to info@channelafrica.co.za or send them to our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. Help us diversify our sound with your voice. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's return to this story. Now, Africa's healthcare systems face mounting pressures from policy uncertainty, growing inequalities, and economic constraints. The 2025 Board of Healthcare Funders, or BHF Conference, is convening the region's foremost healthcare leaders, clinicians, and innovators to chart a more sustainable path forward. This 4-day event is expected to explore how multi-sectoral partnerships, innovative financing, and bold leadership can shape South Africa and the region's healthcare for the better. Let's get up to speed on the conference, and it's being joined now by Moraki Mukhusana, who is on the line and who is a board member of the Board of Healthcare Funders, as well as CEO of Mediate in Botswana. Moraki, thank you for joining us. How are you this Tuesday?
I'm great, Asanda. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
How are you? Good morning to you and to your listeners.
And thanks for making time. Please take us through what came out of those discussions. You were in a session that looked at international financing models. How are other countries progressing towards universal health coverage?
Well, thanks again, and good morning to you and to your listeners. Look, I think what we're learning, we had some good speakers yesterday. I think some of the people who gave us a global perspective. But the thing that's coming out is that there's mixed success in various parts of the world. But some of the things that are very, very clear is that there's unanimity in terms of the viability and the necessity to have this universal health coverage. But also what is coming up is that there are different models, and the different models, they work obviously depending on the different environments, the macroeconomics, the social, and so on. In some instances, there are hybrid models, and these hybrid models can require a collaboration between the private sector and the public sector. But of course, the supply side in terms of the healthcare systems has to be ready. It's important that they are ready. And it's important that the administration of the health insurance should actually be seeking to drop costs, either administrative costs, but also ultimately the healthcare costs. And of course, I think one of the things that's coming out is that there has to be a what you call a political will for these to be successful. And you have to talk about getting people, ultimately when you get to the administration, going back to that, just paying people on time and ensuring that there is some expertise in the private space that can also be leveraged by the public health space as well. So that's what's happening with some of the countries that what we're picking up from the successes in some of the countries across the world that have been able to successfully implement the universal health coverage.
Let's look at the African continent and with the examples of countries like Rwanda, Ghana, and Kenya who have implemented their versions of what we call the national health insurance. What can countries such as South Africa draw from their experiences as we prepare to launch in the country in South Africa?
Well, I think what's most important is, as I said, that there has to be a joint purpose in terms of how you want to do this. One of the other things that's coming out is really how just trying to ensure that there is a robust primary healthcare system that is in place, and then also just ensuring that there's collaboration. I think one of the things that's very, very important is to get the collaboration going, and there has to be engagement. There has to be buy-in from all the stakeholders that come up front. That's what we're seeing from some of the other countries that have been successful, especially the ones that you alluded to.
Let's talk about Botswana, the healthcare in there in terms of the challenges that you are facing in the country's healthcare system. Would you say that your country is ready to launch its own national health insurance?
Yeah, look, but Botswana is for quite a while has had universal healthcare, so to speak, in the sense that the accessibility of healthcare and the costs and the scope of services has actually been quite comprehensive. So there is a bit of, it's a conversation that's just starting off in Botswana. But one of the things that the government is doing in Botswana is they're spending a lot of time trying to get buy-in and just to bring all the stakeholders into the conversation. Or some of the other things, obviously, what they're very clear about is also that they want to be, to see what they can do to leverage off some of what's happening in the private health system. So one would say that Botswana, well, obviously, you never know what might happen because there tends to be a lot of changes and fluidity sometimes in terms of the agenda and the movement in personnel. But one would say that Botswana is starting off quite well and will be ready to be able to implement the national health insurance.
All right. Well, all the best for the rest of the conference. 4 days it will be that you discuss what is very much necessary in terms of especially multi-sectoral partnerships.
Absolutely.
Thanks again for your time. Board member of the Board of Healthcare Funders and CEO of BOMAID, that's in Botswana, is Moragi Mokosana. He was speaking to us on the line. We're going to get to our news headlines in just a bit and followed by our next sports update as well as economics news here on Africa Rise and Shine. Remember, we'd love to hear your views about our show or questions. You can find us on our various social media platforms, that is X, Instagram and TikTok. At Channel Africa 1 is the handle. You can also find us on Facebook as Channel Africa. Let's say good morning to Jwalane Tulo Mwepe with our news headlines.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, immigration expert Professor Lauren Landau has described the departure of 49 Afrikaners from South Africa to the United States as absurd and performative. The first batch of 49 people who left the country have arrived in the U.S. following President Donald Trump's executive order allowing white Afrikaners who claim discrimination to acquire an expedited path to citizenship in the United States. South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority has announced that it will appeal the Gqeberha High Court judgment in which Nigerian televangelist Timothy Omotosho and 2 others were acquitted. Last month, the Nigerian televangelist and his 2 co-accused were acquitted on all charges including rape, human trafficking and racketeering. And finally, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia has still not responded to his call for Vladimir Putin to meet him for direct talks in Turkey on Thursday. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
It's time to say good morning to Figile Lingwati, who's going to give us our sports update. Top of the morning to you, Figile.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. We begin with football news. South Africa's national under-20 football team reached the semi-finals of the under-20 Africa Cup of Nations for the first time in their history and qualified for the 2025 FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Amajita fought hard in extra time of the AFCON quarterfinal to beat the Democratic Republic of Congo 1-0. Amajita will meet Nigeria in the semi-final, also at Suez Canal Stadium in Ismailia, Egypt on Thursday afternoon. Host Egypt meet Morocco in the later semi-final at Cairo's June 30th Stadium at 8 p.m. Central African Time. South Africa's last appearance at the Under-20 World Cup was in Poland in 2019, where they exited in the group stage. Amajita reached the quarters, topping the 5-team Group A, where after a 1-0 defeat against Egypt, they beat Tanzania 1-0, Sierra Leone 4-1, then drew 1-1 against Zambia. Semi-final opponents Nigeria were second in Group B and needed penalties 3-2 to beat Senegal in the Goulet's quarterfinal. The 2025 African Nations Championship CHAN tournament will be co-hosted by Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. The event takes place between the 2nd and the 30th of August. South Africa secured qualification after beating Malawi 2-0 in the second leg qualifier over the weekend. Coach Molefi Ntseki talks about the possible challenges in selecting the squad for the tournament.
The CHAN tournament player selection is a very difficult one, because if ever you are looking at, I'm just going to make this example, if you're looking at Victor Letswalo to say he's my key striker in the team, and then when the season starts and then they go into pre-season, the club might say the player's not ready for a competition like that, a tournament competition. So we are looking at every player, whether he's playing or he's not playing.
Kaizer Chiefs DDC player Aiden McCarthy has become a key part of Ntseki's CHAN squad. He anchored the defense alongside Gwanda Mgonyama in the qualifiers. Ntseki is impressed by McCarthy's development.
The time I spent at Kaizer Chiefs, Aiden was promoted to the first team. He worked under Coach Arthur, and then he worked also with me. And Aiden was a very integral part of the DDC team that recently won championship in the DDC. And Aiden, for the past month, has been training with the first team. When we sent the call-up letter to Kaizer Chiefs to release Aiden Putsani and Samke Lozwane, the club refused because they were looking forward to prepare for the Nedbank Cup. But fortunately, I had a chat with Coach Nabi, and then he agreed to say, I will release the players if.
Now on to tennis news. Emma Raducanu's encouraging Italian Open run came to an end in the last 16 as world number 3 Coco Gauff proved too much of a step up in class. Raducanu ranked 49th in the world, lost 6-1 and 6-2 on the Rome clay to American Gauff. For the first time in her career, the British number 2 had won 3 clay court matches in a row to reach the 4th round in the Italian capital. But any hopes she could cause a shock against 21-year-old Gauff were soon extinguished. Gauff, who reached the French Open final 3 years ago, returned superbly from the start and also dug deep in service games where required. And finally, heavy rain soaked Quail Hollow for the second consecutive day, limiting what players could accomplish on the first official practice day for the 107th PGA Championship. Up to 2 inches of rain were expected, with more showers due today and Wednesday, but focus clear for Thursday when the elite field of 156 golfers tees off. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
An investigation by South Africa's non-profit organization Open Secrets has found that telecoms company MTN has played a role in shutting down the internet during elections and wars in Sudan, Cameroon, Iran, Afghanistan and Uganda, thus enabling governments to silence the opposition.
Interestingly, this isn't just unique to MTN. I think the report also looks at Vodacom DRC as being a proponent of one of these violations, particularly in shutting down the internet during the elections in 2018 and 2019. Autocratic regimes are able to utilize the licenses that they have with these telecom companies basically to, suppress political dissent. And the result is that many people are left without connectivity. And not only does this affect people's ability to communicate with their loved ones and access vital emergency services, but also at a very basic level of access to information.
The Open Secrets investigator, Lu Fono Ntuli.
Africa in business on Channel Africa. Weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Central African Time.
Let's find out the latest in terms of what's happening in the world of economics. Here's Buntle Head Bush with our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Good morning. Exhibitors from across the globe say they're excited and ready for the start of this year's edition of Africa's Travel Indaba in Durban in the KwaZulu-Natal province. Over 1,300 exhibitors are expected to participate in the 3-day summit. Chris Mears from the United is a director of African Travel and Tourism Association.
We are the largest private sector exhibitor on the show floor, and we're looking forward to a fantastic Ndaba, giving great opportunity for our over 800 members across the African continent to connect with quality buyers from around the world who are looking at selling Africa and enhancing the profile of Africa.
South Africa rail company Transnet says a turnaround of the entity will largely rely on its engineering division as an original equipment manufacturer. Transnet will soon launch a rolling stock leasing company called LeaseCo and is also diversifying into the supply of components to make up for the failed Chinese locomotive deal. The entity believes the efforts will return it to financial profitability in the coming financial year. Besi Mabunda is the Transnet Engineering Chief Executive.
We did issue a request for information at the beginning of the year, and this has closed in March. So basically what that is seeking to do is, given that we had unsolicited approaches, we want to formalize this and to see if there are entities out there that have access to spares, which are either replacement components for the CRRC parts.
Egypt's Suez Canal Authority Chief, Osama Rabi, says the authority is considering offering discounts ranging from 12 to 15% on transit fees to help restore traffic in the strategic waterway reeling from attacks by Yemen's Houthis on Red Sea shipping. Rabi says the discounts could be applied within days after a ratification by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Revenue from the Suez Canal, a key source of foreign currency for Egypt, plummeted to $880.9 million in the fourth quarter from $2.4 billion a year earlier. Sierra Leone's largest diamond producer, Koidu Limited, has halted operations and laid off nearly its entire local workforce of more than 1,000 employees following a protracted dispute over pay and working conditions. Workers at the mine went on strike in December 2024 but suspended their walkout to allow for negotiations. They then walked out again in early March. President of the Koidu Limited Workers Union, Charles Kanesi, says that workers had only been receiving 30% of the value of their salaries because they were pegged to the US dollar but paid in the local currency, and the company was using an exchange rate from 2016. In the US, markets have surged to the highest level in several months in response to major tariff cuts agreed to by China and the United States. The two countries agreed to a 90-day temporary pause in reciprocal tariffs after talks in Geneva, Switzerland over the weekend. The Dow Jones closed up by 2.8%. The BBC's Michelle Fleury reports.
Monday's trade truce with China, which involves a 90-day pause on both countries' most punitive tariffs, sent major US stock markets rocketing higher. Investors believe the softening of tariffs is good news for company profits and good for the economy. But some market watchers say investors are getting over their skis, warning that this is, after all, only a temporary truce and that tariffs are still higher than they were at the start of this year.
Now taking a look at our indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 604. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 44. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 435. And in Zambia, it's at 26 kwacha 61. Taking a look at the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 reals 67. Russia is at 81 rubles 40. India, 84 rupees 86. China, it's at 7 yuan 21, and South Africa, $1 is trading at 18 rand 26. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 89 to the euro. For a look at the commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,234 and platinum at $984 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $64.73 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Buntle Hedbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Tragedy has struck the eastern DRC, and we're now hearing that the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, more than 100 people have lost their lives following torrential rains that triggered flash floods and landslides in the South Kivu province. The village of Bushushu in the Kalhene territory was one of the hardest hit, with homes, schools and farmland washed away in an instant. Dozens of people are still reported being missing, and thousands have been displaced at this stage. Local officials say that the true scale of the disaster is only starting to emerge, as heavy rainfall and poor infrastructure is making access difficult for rescue teams. To get the latest, we're now joined on the line by our journalist based in the DRC, Jimmy Shukrani Bakonera. Jimmy, great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
Jimmy, what do we know about the situation on the ground at the moment?
Yes, as you understand, it happened in this eastern part of the DRC, where these floods have just recorded some victims. Until right now, the researchers of the government of Congo are keeping by searching some bodies which they missed their lives in those floods and great inundation in the eastern part of the DRC, because it was due to the rain which bettered this part of the country, and it causes more than the destruction of some infrastructures. And right now, people are just in difficulty of just getting the basic necessities due to those floods which happened, and it constitutes just a danger to the neighbors of the Fizi territory and in Kalehe, just in South Kivu. So right now, the situation is keeping researchers by the government of Congo, and they give the numbers of those who misses their lives in this inundation and floods in this part of the eastern DRC. Until now, there is not official numbers which are just governed by the government of Congo, but the minister in Tatario told to media that more than 130 persons have died and others injured in the floods, Peter.
All right, and I suppose with so many people missing, that number sadly could rise in the coming days. I don't know if you can describe a little bit more the kind of destruction that these floods have caused, how badly the village of Bushushu has been affected, and the nearby areas.
Yes, it's affected the neighbors areas, because it's an area which is entirely with some strait, and because it was raining, and this area is in the great mountains, and the reason why some areas, that the neighbors areas, were affected difficultly with this, because some mountains have just broken down, and it causes many difficulties to people, and this was why even the number of misses was just reported on high. Until now, the government have a difficulty of giving some precision according about to the numbers, because this morning I talking with the civil society there he told me that in that number, which I processed here behalf, there is 50 men, and all men of them are women and children. So it means the government until now have difficulty of recovering some basic necessity of the victim, because there are many people was injured, and the violence can go just on high when you're trying to see what is the official are saying right now. You can imagine that the number of died people can be just on high, and maybe we will be still in waiting. Another thing is the destruction of infrastructure like electricity. They all broken down, so it means the people are just cross on over the situation with it, which is not good, because everything they are stopped since this happened.
Is this area prone to this kind of weather events? Is this something that we see every year in the east of the DRC? Torrential rains, floods, and sadly this kind of disaster?
The problem is maybe the unplacement, which is not taken on care, because as I told you, is the area which is neighbored by many mountains, and people don't know fear of just go in those mountains and to put their house in the mountains, and when it's rain, all the mountains broke down, and are the people surrounding there which are suffering. So reason why it happened wherever they were, and you can imagine it can those floods can be reported in the part of the DRC, the eastern DRC can be reported maybe more than 4 times per year. This is causes great difficulties of the people in the people of there, and I mean even the lack of the infrastructures. The government do not take care of the civilian inhabitant there, and when they are gonna build something, they do not take care of the emplacement. So reason why they happens there, and when it rains, the rivers are just across over the world. A reason why those are reported many times in the year here in the eastern part of the DRC.
What has been the response of local authorities and national government to this current disaster? What have they been able to do? What are they doing?
Right now, what they are going to do, as I talking with local authorities, they are just trying to search people who misses their life in these floods, and after that, the government of Kinshasa could just intervene by supporting the families, because those who were injured, who are just in a great situation, who didn't die, they are following the medical some health structures, and the government promises to intervene and to help them by covering the basic necessities of the family who was affected with the floods. But until now, there is no great measure which has been taken just to protect those floods in the eastern part of the DRC. But the government promises, of course, to help the family of the victim and to ensure that maybe this situation will not happen again. And local authorities, they are only waiting what the government, the central government will do at the benefit of those victims, the family of victims.
I'm guessing too that access must be really difficult at this time to reach some of these people. if infrastructure has been damaged and roads flooded and some washed away?
You know, this area is people there just they are living by farming and other activities which touch very on high some cities like when try to talk about the Fizi just it's a help. It's just an area which helps some towns, some cities like Viranda. Others, when try to talking about the Kalehe, it's a help the city of Goma and others. So the main road from Goma until Bukavu is just broken down. So it means there is no access, and the area which depend by those countryside which was affected by these floods, it means that there is a great problem. Like when we take an example like Kalehe. Kalehe is one of the production of banana which come to reinforce the economy in Goma. When trying to see Fizi is an area which is very high in Pareto, which reinforce the economy of Uvira. So it means you understand that this is going to cause just the great problem in the areas which depended, of course, by food with this countryside. The destruction of the infrastructures does constitute a problem not only for the local people or the neighbors area, but also on the great cities in the eastern part of the DRC, which are now depending by those areas affected. So the road until now still unpracticable, and this is a great problem because vehicles and other ministries of transport cannot reach the area which was affected because there is no way.
Do we have any idea how people are coping emotionally and physically with what's happened to them?
Until now, not yet.
I think you may have touched on this a little bit earlier, but if we know that these floods happen and they happen at the same time each year, how prepared are the local and national authorities ahead of time to deal with such disasters?
Yes, the non-government organization just last year the NGO has tried just to intervene when this situation also happened in Kalehe, just in the South Kivu. Some organization has just taken some measures of struggle against this disasters, but we don't know why there is no result. There is no effective result about it. But the government of Congo tried also to rehabilitate some infrastructure like the road and to destroy some mountains which causes those disasters. But until now, what is the question of people, the local people there, is why always when this happens, the government can take some measures, but without any duration of effective measure in order to protect the people. And the organization, the international organization, also tried, like in Fizi, there is a company, a Chinese company, which have took just a measure of rehabilitate and construct some roads in order to struggle against this accident and to put end to the floods, just not to protect even the river, because rivers also constitute a great problem. Just they try to build some like a breaker which can help people to don't be affected directly with those disasters. But until now, there is no effective response to this situation. And maybe it will be something like a plan. They can take a plan and consult the local people in order to give them a plan of struggling against, because those people knows very well the problem of there, because even rivers it constitute a great problem. Last year I was there. I saw a river just can revive the whole villages, and maybe in 30 kilometers a river can destroy more than 3 or 4 villages. So you understand that is a great problem. I saw with myself, and I try to see maybe the local people can know very well this problem, and just get the authorities and other organizations which are trying to struggle against this disastrous.
Jimmy, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, as always, for your comprehensive updates, and particularly on this disaster that's befallen the Eastern DRC. Thank you so much. Asante sana.
Thank you, Asante sana. Thank you, Peter.
All right, that's our local journalist in the DRC. He's based in Goma, Jimmy Shukrani Bakonera, speaking to us about these flash floods that have played out in the eastern DRC. And it looks like one village in particular has been pretty much wiped out, Bushushu in the Kalele territory. But a number of other areas have been affected, and it almost happened in an instant that we see homes, schools, farmland washed away by these floods, which, on top of climate change, sadly happen every year. But people are building on mountainsides and in the valleys, and this makes them particularly vulnerable. All right, that's where we'll leave it for the time being as we prepare for the third and final hour of the program. My name is Peter Ndoro, and we're broadcasting from Johannesburg, South Africa. Asanda, Beda.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us for this third and final hour of Rise and Shine here on Channel Africa this Tuesday, the 13th of May. So what we can look forward to in this coming hour, the National Prosecuting Authority in the Eastern Cape Province of South Africa saying they will appeal a High Court judgment in which Nigerian televangelist Timothy Omotosho and 2 others were acquitted last month. Of course, that story continues. And we'll look at the group of Afrikaners as well, 49 of them. Refugees in inverted commas, we say. They've arrived at Dulles International Airport just outside of Washington, D.C. in the U.S. All that and more coming up.
Yeah, but first, we catch you up with today's news. Here is Joaleni Tulo Nwebe and the sports headlines to follow with
Fikile Lingwati.
There you go.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. The CEO of South African civic organisation AfriForum, Kali Kriel, says the organisation had nothing to do with the decision of the 49 white Afrikaners who left South Africa and acquired refugee status in the United States. 49 Afrikaners travelled to the US over the weekend after taking up US President Donald Trump's offer to move over as refugees. Kriel says AfriForum respects the decision of those individuals. He says AfriForum is determined to continue together with other institutions of the Solidarity Movement to help create a future for Afrikaners in South Africa.
It's not our decision. That's a personal decision by everybody for themselves. The decision we've taken as AfriForum is that the only place where Afrikaners can survive as a cultural community is in South Africa. The reason being we are not Dutch, German, French anymore. And those people that came here centuries ago became a new people, the Afrikaners, and to survive as a cultural community, you need to have an Afrikaans cultural environment.
Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has again erroneously stated that there is a genocide happening in South Africa as justification for his executive order allowing white Afrikaners who claim discrimination to acquire an expedited path to citizenship in the United States. President Trump made these comments.
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, we're supposed to have I guess a G20 meeting there or something, but we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of, but it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa.
South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority has again announced that it will appeal the Gqeberha High Court judgment in which Nigerian televangelist Timothy Omotosho and 2 others were acquitted. Last month, the Nigerian televangelist and his 2 co-accused were acquitted on all charges, including rape, human trafficking and racketeering. This after Judge Irma Skuman said in her ruling that the state had failed to prove its case beyond reasonable doubt. The Eastern Cape Director of Public Prosecutions, Barry Ndoro, says the decision to appeal was made after a team of the NPA interrogated the transcript and sourced legal opinion from senior counsel. NPA spokesperson Mthunzi Mhaga.
We take the view firmly so that the Honorable Judge misdirected herself in applying the law, and there is not much evaluation that went into the evidence of each witness that has been led by the state prosecutors. However, we are constrained in criticizing the judges in public platform like this. We only have one legal avenue, which is an appeal process, in respect of which yesterday, the 12th of May, our counsel sent a request for clarification of factual findings in the judgment because we believe that they are not glaring, they are not clear at all.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame has called on all African countries to work together and deal with conflicts and coups on the continent. He says the African Union needs to do more to address the many challenges facing the continent. Speaking at the Africa CEO Forum in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, Kagame says regardless of the challenges, efforts must be made to find lasting peace.
In terms of peace and security, and you look at the whole continent, you find there are many trouble spots, all kinds of efforts going on, back and forth, succeeding in some places, not succeeding in others, and continued efforts going on. Again, these are some of the areas, because of the past and how we have handled our own affairs, that we are all of a sudden reminded that we can't do all things by ourselves.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia has still not responded to his call for Vladimir Putin to meet him for direct talks in Turkey on Thursday. In his nightly address, he said Russian shelling and assaults on Ukraine had continued. He accused President Putin of remaining silent on the proposed talks.
Unfortunately, the world has still not received a clear response from Russia regarding numerous proposals to cease fire. Russian shelling and assaults continue. Moscow has remained silent all day regarding the proposal for a direct meeting. This silence is very strange. Russia will have to end the war anyway, and it's better to do it sooner.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, the junior Springboks coach is confident the team will go all the way in the World Rugby Under-20 Championship in Italy. And Nigeria defeated Senegal in a dramatic penalty shootout to reach the Under-20 AFCON semi-finals. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
A group of 49 Afrikaner refugees has arrived at Dulles International Airport just outside Washington, D.C. to a warm welcome from from senior officials of the U.S. Departments of State and Homeland Security. The group of white South Africans departed Johannesburg overnight and arrived in the United States via Dakar, Senegal. They are the first beneficiaries of U.S. refugee status after President Donald Trump signed an executive order in February seeking to address the so-called, and I quote, egregious acts of the Republic of South Africa, end quote. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports.
The refugees who were described here as having experienced violence and a fear for their lives are expected to be transferred to different states where they will begin the process of assimilation, while their initial needs of housing and other basic requirements are expected to be facilitated by the receiving state.
We underscored for them that the American people are a welcoming and generous people, and we underscored the importance of assimilation into the United States, which is one of the very important factors that we look to in refugee admissions. And through this resettlement program for these folks who were vetted in South Africa, and we're sending a clear message that the United States really rejects the egregious persecution of people on the basis of race in South Africa, and we welcome these people to the United States and to a new future.
Landa was party to a call with Deputy Minister of International Relations Alvin Boertes on Friday, where the allegations of discrimination were rejected as unfounded, a view echoed by President Cyril Ramaphosa on a working visit to Côte d'Ivoire.
We've raised our own concern because those people who are being enticed to go to the United States do not fit the definition of a refugee. A refugee is someone who has to leave their country out of fear of political persecution, religious persecution, or economic persecution, and they don't fit that bill. They don't fit that description. And I had a conversation with President Trump on the phone, and he said, what's happening down there? And I said, President, what you've been told by those people who are opposed to transformation back home in South Africa is not true. And I added to him, I said, we were well taught by Nelson Mandela and other iconic leaders like Oliver Tambo on how to continue to build a united nation out of the diverse groupings that we have in South Africa.
While the U.S. president indicated that he was expecting a leadership delegation from South Africa at the White House next week, listen to President Trump.
South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, we're supposed to have a G20 meeting there or something, but we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of, but it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it.
A first group of white Afrikaner refugees now in the system, with more expected in the weeks and months ahead. This issue is one of several that would be addressed if and when President Ramaphosa travels for a face-to-face meeting with his U.S. counterpart, a meeting that is likely to focus on issues related to trade, which has emerged as a key bilateral concern in recent months, different foreign policy positions, including the question of Palestinians in Gaza or peace in Ukraine, and the future working relationship ahead of the G20 Leaders Summit in South Africa later this year, which President Ramaphosa is keen to have President Trump attend. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York.
Meanwhile, South Africa's Minister of International Relations, Ronald Lamola, has dismissed claims of racial persecution against white South Africans, saying there's no evidence to support such assertions. Speaking at a media briefing in Pretoria on Monday on the country's G20 presidency, Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe has more.
A chartered plane carrying 49 South African Afrikaners departed for the United States on Sunday night under U.S. President Donald Trump's offer for the discriminated South African individuals and families to relocate. But on Monday, South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation has insisted that the group of 49 Afrikaners who left South Africa heading to the United States are not refugees. Speaking to the media in Pretoria, DECO's Minister Ronald Lamola asserted the following.
From the perspective of the South African government, in terms of the executive orders that have defined the refugees, the South Africans as refugees, we have stated in the statement we issued on Friday that in line with the international definition, they do not qualify for that status according to us. And there is no persecution of white African South Africans in South Africa. This has been proven by a number of statistics in our country, including the police reports, which don't back that assertion of persecution of white South Africans on the basis of their race.
Lamola reiterates that the idea that Afrikaners are being persecuted is completely false, baseless, as many Afrikaner groups have denounced this assertion.
They can't provide any proof of persecution because there's none. There is no any form of persecution to African and South Africans. And we are glad that a number of organizations, even from Afrikaner structures, have denounced this so-called persecution. They have stated that where there are challenges, there are platforms to resolve them within the South African context, which makes this a domestic issue. Our legislation provides sufficient platforms for any issue to be ventilated in that regard. And white South Africans, including Afrikaners, have voiced their views in this regard.
During a recent visit by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that he would be meeting U.S. President Donald Trump soon, but no timelines were stated.
With regards to the working visit of President Ramaphosa to the U.S., I can state that it's at an advanced stage. The presidency, I believe, will soon announce the dates and when the engagement is going to happen. I can only say that it's at an advanced stage.
Lamola also weighed in on the appointment of the new SA ambassador to the U.S.
The appointment of the ambassador, whether it negates or when we're going to appoint an ambassador, no, it doesn't negate. The appointment of the special envoy does not negate the need to appoint an ambassador. It is still necessary that we must appoint an ambassador, but we need to do so having assessed the whole terrain and the environment with regards to the bilateral trade relations and also the trade relations between South Africa and the U.S., and that is what we are currently doing. So we will soon, when the president is ready, he will definitely appoint an ambassador.
Meanwhile, Clayson Monyela, DECO's Deputy Director General, gave clarity on whether U.S. has given any information and whether to classify the departed 49 as refugees or not.
Just on the issue of whether the U.S. has shared with us information regarding the 49. And I must say, Minister, I'm very happy to see that when the media uses the word refugees, they put it in quotes because it's a contested term. As Minister was articulating, we don't regard them as refugees.
Monyela explains what qualifies an individual to be recognized as a refugee.
But just make the point that the application for someone to be considered a refugee in this context is treated as confidential between the applicant and the country they are applying to, so they wouldn't be at liberty to share with us the details thereof.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg. Big news from Channel Africa. Now you can listen and watch your favorite shows on Channel Africa. Channel Africa is streaming live on the internet on all our social media pages at Channel Africa 1. from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. Central African Time. Download the SABC Plus app or visit our website www.channelafrica.co.za and stream us live on all our social media pages at Channel Africa 1. Channel Africa now streaming for your eyes and ears only. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba.
Sadio, quelles sont les motivations derrière la décision du général Mamadi Doumbouya d'accorder la grâce présidentielle à Moussa Dadis Camara?
Alors, officiellement ici, c'est pour des raisons de santé et puis le décret aussi a ajouté que c'est dans un élan de réconciliation nationale et un cas social. Mais au-delà de ça, les journalistes ils voient sous un angle politique. Les moins critiques estiment que c'est pour peut-être faciliter un petit peu la réconciliation que pourrait tenter aujourd'hui le CNSD.
Vue d'Afrique, du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Right, we continue with this story, and it's fairly controversial, partly because the United States is creating the impression that South Africa is persecuting white Afrikaners in particular because of their race. Farms are being repossessed by the state, and we've seen 49 Afrikaners arrive in the country, Dallas Airport, just outside Washington, D.C., to start what they described as a bright new future, one that they're being denied in South Africa, according to a U.S. official on arrival there. Well, let's get a response now from the spokesperson from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation in South Africa. We're now joined on the line by Crispin Phiri. Crispin, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I guess as the International Relations Department, you must be very disappointed by the narrative that's being painted by the US accepting these Afrikaners as refugees from South Africa.
I think accepting is one thing, and normally if individuals would believe that they are being persecuted in a country, they wouldn't be fetched from country X, and that's really the nub of it. We do not take offense that people would want to believe that they can go to another country to have a better life. I think that's people's choice. But yes, the fact that they are being fetched from South Africa, and really it just conflates the whole idea of what a refugee is. I saw a package where someone was asking, there are other countries where people are really suffering harm. You have wars, you have all manner of difficulties that citizens of various nations face. South Africa is not that. I mean, Peter, I went to a school where I was taught Afrikaans. This was just a couple of years ago. To this day, Afrikaans is still being taught in schools. If you drive on South African roads, you'll come across names that are in Afrikaans. If you look at the political leadership in South Africa, you'll find Afrikaans ministers. If you look at the judiciary, you'll find Afrikaans judges, Afrikaner judges rather. And Afrikaner ministers and so on. So white Afrikaners in South Africa really enjoy the normal attributes of being a citizen, as compared to other countries where there are being minorities and refugees being persecuted. They would not enjoy the level of prominence that that they claim Afrikaners are being deprived of in South Africa.
This story has been running for quite a while now. South Africa has reached out to the United States, as high as the president talking to President Trump directly. Is the message from South Africa falling on deaf ears? Is President Trump and his administration just refusing to hear?
We would be able to navigate exactly what informs this insistence that there is a white genocide in South Africa very soon. As you may have heard, President Trump confirmed that President Ramaphosa will be meeting him in the coming week. So definitely, at least once the two presidents are around the table together, one can then get a sense of really what informs this view. And I think that is the power of diplomacy. People will hold their views, people will have a particular perspective, but where there's engagement, we then can understand what are the underlying assumptions that drive some of these perceptions and views.
A lot of people may be wondering what has changed, because this isn't the first time that Donald Trump has been president of South Africa and has had to deal with African countries. What is different this time, do you think, in terms of how he's looking at South Africa? Speculation is that this is punishment over South Africa taking Israel to the ICJ.
I think there are views of that kind, but we wouldn't want to entertain speculation because really it's a rabbit hole. There could be a variety of reasons, but at the end of the day, as a government, we have an obligation to look at things from a factual perspective, and that's what the visit to the United States offers us. It offers us that opportunity to engage with facts and not, like as you correctly say, speculations.
All right, let me ask in another way then. How was President Trump towards South Africa during his first presidency?
What we saw was generally a quiet approach towards Africa as a whole. And you would have seen that during President Trump's first administration, Africa didn't feature quite prominently on the agenda. And South Africa remains a gateway, we believe, to Africa in many ways. So in that sense, we would say the relationship was a little bit muted than what it would be with other U.S. presidents and administrations.
Has the U.S. reached out to the South African government to ask about what's been happening in the country, particularly with these accusations that white Afrikaners are part of a genocide? Have they come to you and say, please help us understand the situation on the ground?
The president indicated that on his call with President Trump, there was that preliminary engagement of what exactly is happening on the ground. The administration itself has not directly reached out to our officials, but that would not be unfamiliar in the sense that when one applies for refugee status, Peter, it's done on a confidential basis between the applicant and the potential host country. So it would be strange for a host country to go to another country and try and say, can you confirm if Peter is being persecuted? That's not how the refugee application process works. However, the requirement in terms of international law is that this must be a well-founded view of fear, a well-founded view that you are fearing persecution. And objectively, even U.S. senators, as I speak now, I'm reading something from a U.S. Senator, Jean Shin, Shaheen. She's a ranking member of the United States Foreign Relations Committee, and she's released a statement saying it's baffling as to why the Trump administration is admitting Afrikaners for resettlement while continuing an indefinite suspension of thousands of legitimate asylum seekers who have fled persecution, often because their lives were at risk. Last year, the UN found no South Africans were eligible for refugee status. The decision by this administration to put one group at the front of the line is clearly politically motivated. So even actors and political actors in the US are quite clear that there's no basis for this type of approach.
For a head of state, President Trump, to say that genocide is taking place in South Africa, diplomatically, that is huge. Can the relationship between South Africa and the United States survive what looks like body blow after body blow? You have an ambassador sent home, accusations of genocide, tariffs being imposed, threats against Goa. How much more can this relationship take?
No, I think, first of all, we must always understand that our relations with the United States are not only also limited to the United States, they are also with the people of America. And when you see statements like this from a senator, it tells you that the American people have a particular disposition towards South Africa. The American people know what's happening in South Africa. So our engagements are also, it's about people-to-people relations where they can be strained between governments. That may be so, but what is important is that the people-to-people relations remain. Governments come and they go, but the people remain. And that is the power of diplomacy as well, is to ensure that we are constantly able to engage as people first, and then ultimately the governments represent the people.
And then perhaps finally, briefly, have you had any engagement with the local American diplomats, the embassy here?
Yes, there are numerous engagements ongoing on specific issues that one would have to facilitate. In this instance, Peter, we did not stand in the way of these South African citizens who thought that they can go for this offer that the Americans have offered to them. And so the engagements would have also been around some of those issues, but also South Africa stating its position, but also not preventing these individuals from pursuing this offer that has been offered to them.
Crispin, always great talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Peter.
That's Crispin Piri, who's the spokesperson for South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation, confirming that there will be an engagement with the White House next week, we're told, where we will see what Donald Trump's response will be. For him to use words like genocide, I mean, that is pretty severe. And I wonder if a country, Asanda, can be slandered? If there are any legal repercussions, that'll be an interesting case for the lawyers to explore.
I'm sure there must be some kind of legal recourse. Because it's serious, as you say, the allegations being made against the country without reason, without proof.
Yeah. And they've got the CIA, for goodness sake. I think the CIA is in the country and they would know. But anyway, we'll explore that further as the days go by. Because right now it's time for your news headlines. Here is Jwalani Tulo.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, the CEO of South African civic organisation AfriForum, Carly Kriel, says the organisation had nothing to do with the decision of 49 white Afrikaners who left South Africa and acquired refugee status in the United States. 49 Afrikaners travelled to the US over the weekend after taking up US President Donald Trump's offer to move over as refugees. Authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo have put the death toll at more than 130 following following torrential rains that triggered flash floods and landslides in South Kivu province. And finally, medical sources in Gaza say a well-known Palestinian photojournalist, Hassan Eslai, has been killed by an Israeli airstrike on a hospital. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening now in the world of sports. Good morning, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you again, Asanda. Let me start off with football news this hour. The Nigeria Under-20 side held their nerve to secure a place in the semi-finals of the Total Energies CAF Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations Egypt 2025, defeating defending champions Senegal 3-1 on penalties at the Suez Canal Stadium. The West African Giants renewed their fierce rivalry in a tense quarterfinal that saw both sides create scoring chances, but ultimately failed to break the deadlock in 120 minutes of action. Nigeria, unbeaten in the group stages, maintained their composure in the shootout with sport kicks expertly converted by Precious Benjamin, Emmanuel Chukwu and Israel Ayuma. With this result, Nigeria move on one step closer to a record-extending 8th Under-20 AFCON title. Still with the AFCON, South Africa's Under-20 national football team reached the semi-finals of the Under-20 AFCON for the 5th time in their history and qualified for the 2025 FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Amajita fought hard in extra time of the AFCON quarterfinal to beat the Democratic Republic of Congo 1-0. Amajita will meet Nigeria in the semi-final also at Suez Canal Stadium in Ismailia, Egypt on Thursday afternoon. South Africa's last appearance at the Under-20 World Cup was in Poland in 2019, where they exited in the group stage. Amajita reached the quarters, topping the 5-team Group A, where after a 1-0 defeat against Egypt, they beat Tanzania 1-0 and Sierra Leone 4-1, then drew 1-1 against Zambia. Semi-final opponents Nigeria were second in Group B and needed penalties to beat Senegal in the goalless quarterfinal. Now, rugby news. The Junior Springboks are confident the team has a solid foundation to go all the way in the World Rugby Under-20 Championship taking place in Italy in June and July. The South Africans finished third in the recently completed Under-20 Rugby Championship, also featuring New Zealand, Australia and Argentina in Gqeberha. In spite of this, the team feels the valuable experience was just what they needed. The coach, Kevin Foot, says this was disappointing, but the team's attacking skills will be a solid foundation to build on.
Huge. I think we scored some amazing tries. I think Malusi's done an amazing job there, and I really feel like the players have got good clarity of how we want to attack, and I think that we've played some exciting, brilliant rugby in this tournament, and just to hear the crowd getting behind us and the support when we started to really light it up was exceptional. So we know we're not a finished project and we know we've got a lot of work to do, but I just think that our attack has come a long way.
This was the first time the players have played in a major competition as a team, and a lot of combinations were not familiar to coaches and players. The captain, Riley Norton, says in that context, the team can only get better.
A lot of our combinations and players have not played together, so to have these 3 games against proper opposition in high pressure environment before the World Cup, I think it's going to be vital for us. So I think the lessons that we learned and the connections and just the relationships that we built outside of the field and building trust is extremely important to us. It's one of the big keys that we talk about, is that if we can trust the person next to you in those tough times, it will go a long way.
Finally, tennis news. Emma Raducanu's encouraging Italian Open run came to an end in the last 16 as well. Number 3 Coco Gauff proved too much of a step up in class. Raducanu, ranked 49th in the world, lost 6-1, 6-2 on the Rome clay to American Gauff. For the first time in a career, the British number 2 had won 3 clay court matches in a row to reach the 4th round in the Italian capital. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa 1. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa 1. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Right, it's time to find out what's been happening in the world of business, commerce and economics as we say good morning to Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning to all our listeners. Tourism industry experts are calling on government to improve investments to all of South Africa's provinces and not just established tourism hotspots. This after government announced a $355,000 boost for the tourism industry, which it hopes will attract more tourists to the country. Although tourism has rebounded to 82% of pre-pandemic levels, the majority of international visitor traffic remains concentrated in Cape Town and the Kruger National Park. Other regions, despite offering rich tourism assets, remain undervisited. Alan Campbell, Sales and Marketing Director at Anu Hotels and Resorts, says government investment must be viewed as a foundation and not the finish line.
Enhancing air access means more direct flights and better connections to key domestic and international markets. This can only ensure an increased tourist arrival. And whilst this exciting news is great to hear, it must be seen as the foundation, certainly not the finish line.
South African rail company Transnet says the turnaround of the entity will largely rely on its engineering division as an original equipment manufacturer. Transnet will soon launch a rolling stock leasing company called LeaseCo and is also diversifying into the supply of components to make up for the failed Chinese locomotive deal. The entity believes their efforts will return it to financial profitability in the coming financial year. Besi Mabunda is the Transnet Engineering Chief Executive.
We did issue a request for information at the beginning of the year, and this has closed in March. So basically what that is seeking to do is, given that we had unsolicited approaches, we want to formalize this and to see if there are entities out there that have access to spares, which are either replacement components for the CRRC parts.
Egypt's Suez Canal Authority Chief Osama Rabi says the authority is considering offering discounts ranging from 12 to 15% on transit fees to help restore traffic in the strategic waterway reeling from attacks by Yemen's Houthis on Red Sea shipping. Rabi says the discounts could be applied within days after a ratification by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Revenue from the Suez Canal, a key source of foreign currency for Egypt, plummeted to $880.9 million in the fourth quarter from $2.4 billion a year earlier. Sierra Leone's largest diamond producer, Koidu Limited, has halted operations and laid off nearly its entire local workforce of more than 1,000 employees following a protracted dispute over pay and working conditions. Workers at the mine went on strike in December last year, but suspended their walkout to allow for negotiations. They then walked out again in early March. President of the Koidu Limited Workers Union, Charles Kainesi, says that workers had only been receiving 30% of the value of their salaries because they were pegged to the US dollar, but paid in the local currency, and the company was using an exchange rate from 2016.
U.S. markets have surged to the highest level in several months in response to major tariffs cuts agreed to by China and the United States. The two countries agreed to a 90-day temporary pause in reciprocal tariffs after talks in Geneva, Switzerland over the weekend. The Dow Jones closed up by 2.8%. The BBC's Michelle Fleury reports.
Monday's trade truce with China, which involves a 90-day pause on both countries' most punitive tariffs, sent major US stock markets rocketing higher. Investors believe the softening of tariffs is good news for company profits and good for the economy. But some market watchers say investors are getting over their skis, warning that this is, after all, only a temporary truce and that tariffs are still higher than they were at the start of this year.
Now for a look at our indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 604. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 44. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 435. And in Zambia, it's at 26 kwacha 61. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 reals 67. Russia is at 81 rubles 40. India at 84 rupees 86 and China 7 yuan 21. South Africa, $1 is trading at 18 rand 26. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 89 to the euro. Looking at the commodities, gold is trading at $3,234 and platinum at $984 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $64.73 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Bontle Hedbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Call us on +27 63 406 9126.
I can see my whole world changing.
And contribute to the conversation. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
All right, so the National Prosecuting Authority in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa says that it will appeal a High Court judgment in which Nigerian televangelist Timothy Umotosho and two others were acquitted. Last month, the Nigerian pastor and his two co-accused were acquitted on all charges, including rape, human trafficking, and racketeering. This after Judge Irma Skuman said in her ruling that the state had failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, to get details on this, we're joined on the line by South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority spokesperson, Mthunzi Mahaga. Thank you so much for making time for us on this Tuesday, Mthunzi. How are you?
I'm very good. Good morning, Asanda, and to your listeners. Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. Why is the NPA appealing the judgment?
Look, the judgment itself, the acquittal, has a devastating impact on our work to ensure that victims of gender-based violence receive justice and are protected. We then took a decision to outsource the services of an independent senior counsel who will then advise us on how to approach the appeal if we were to. Then we also assembled a team of internal experienced prosecutors who prepared a memorandum of advice, and they had to go through over 2,000 pages of a transcript and 3 judgments, and they came to a conclusion that there are prospects of a successful appeal if we approach the SCA for that. And we based that on 2 grounds. One, that we are of the firm view that the Honorable Judge misdirected herself on the law and that there was not sufficient evaluation of the evidence in respect of each state witness that was presented in court, and as such, we strongly feel that the SCA can overturn that judgment.
So, Advocate, was there any specific aspect of that in terms of the testimony, including that of the key witness, Cheryl Zondi, that the NPA believes was not adequately considered?
We don't find it in the judgment, the basis of which or on which the evidence of all the state witnesses was rejected. There's only a find in respect of 2, and as such, we have requested clarification from the judge on the factual findings that informed the acquittal judgment. We do that in terms of Section 319 of the Criminal Procedure Act and a lot of case law that gives us a right to do so. We did that yesterday, the 12th of May, 2025.
The NPA has been criticized by women's rights activists after the judgment was handed out. How would you respond to the criticism, given the public attention and emotional weight that this case has carried over the years? And how is the NPA balancing legal procedure with public interest and expectation?
You are right. The public, especially the victims of crime, have every right and reason to be devastated, to criticize us, and to be frustrated by the outcome because of the adverse findings that were made by the judge on the unethical conduct of the prosecutors and the ineptitude thereof in handling the case. National Director Advocate Shamila Patoi decided to then assemble a team to investigate in order to see if we can take disciplinary steps against them. This is also to ensure that the image and the confidence that the public has in the NPA is not eroded. She also tried to reach out to the victims to at least outline the processes that we'll undertake and to ensure them that we continue to serve them in protecting them and ensuring proper administration of justice.
How soon might the appeal be heard?
The difficulty with Section 319 of the Criminal Procedure Act that regulates appeals of this nature is that there's no time frame within which such needs to be filed, but we'll do so within a reasonable time as we started yesterday. We hope that the judge will respond soonest so that we can finalize our questions of law.
In terms of the rearresting of Omotosho over the past weekend, allegedly for him flouting immigration laws, what does this appeal then mean in terms of Omotosho being deported?
These are 2 separate processes, but we took into account any possible deportation, but it did not influence our decision to change it, and we're proceeding and going ahead. We know the bearing that it might have on the appeal at a later stage if he were to be deported, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Okay, if the appeal is successful, what could it mean practically? And would there be a retrial or new charges being brought?
Remember the Oscar Pistorius judgment of culpable homicide that was converted into murder. It was the same approach, and therefore what we are praying for in terms of the meticulous argument that we'll be presenting in the SCA is for the acquittal judgment to be set aside and a guilty verdict to be ordered.
So in terms of moving forward for the NPA side of things, are you concerned as the National Prosecuting Authority that this ruling might deter survivors of gender-based violence from coming forward in future cases, especially those that are this public?
We are really concerned. That's why we've taken time to scrutinize it and see if it's appealable. We've concluded that it is. And we have tried to reach out to the victims through the NGOs that represent them, or this Chapter 9 institution that represents them. That engagement is continuing. And we hope and appeal to the public out there not to lose faith in us, given the fact that only last week you guys were commending us and singing praises when there was a conviction of the mother of Jocelyn Smith in the Western Cape, as well as in the Eastern Cape, a police officer who raped a 17-year-old victim of domestic violence inside a police station and was sentenced to 20 years. It's a demonstration of our commitment to protect victims of these crimes.
All right, so your final message as the NPA for the public and those affected by the case is let's not lose hope on the National Prosecuting Authority.
Let's please soldier on. we have the prosecutorial arsenal to achieve that which we seek to in protecting the victims of crime.
Thank you so much, Advocate, again for your time. We'll leave it there for today.
You're welcome.
South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority spokesperson is Advocate Mthunzi Mhaka, speaking to us here on Africa Rise and Shine.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
So here's a big question that's being considered at the moment. Does air pollution, derived nitrogen, improve the ocean's ability to remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, or does it create an even worse situation? Well, these are some of the questions that the Global Response to Climate Change Dr. Katja Aliteri, winner of the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust's New Frontiers Research Award for 2025, seeks to uncover. Dr. Aliteri is an associate professor in oceanography at the University of Cape Town in South Africa and was announced the winner of the award at a function in Johannesburg. Now, the prize is worth over $410,000. She spoke to Channel Africa's Nhlanhla Mahlangu.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
All right, so that's another story that we'll be looking at. But in the meantime, let's look at this story regarding South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who says that the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AfCFTA, is a key economic driver for growth on the continent. The president was speaking at the Africa CEO Forum 2025, which is currently underway in Côte d'Ivoire in Abidjan. Heads of state, chief of executives, officers of leading African and global companies, visionary entrepreneurs, investors and changemakers from across the continent and beyond have converged at the summit. President Ramaphosa says that the AfCFTA is fundamentally a transformative effort which enables the continent's economic growth and integration.
You know, as I walked in with President Ouattara, President Kagame and others, as I entered this room, I could smell money. And I welcome this opportunity to sit here and look at people who have money or control money. And as I look at all of you and I say, wow, these are people who control a lot of money on the continent.
Right.
And I want them to smell the coffee and go beyond their 17% skepticism, because the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a fundamentally transformative mechanism that was adopted by the leaders of the continent. And we should recognize and applaud the fact that the political leaders under the aegis of the AU saw wisdom, and led by President Isufu, and President Kagame was leading the reform process, they saw wisdom in scaling the fortunes of Africa up and moving us just beyond just talking about politics and the unity of the continent, and wanting to put in place the real building blocks of what will support that unity and the progress on our continent. And that was about the economic growth of the continent through engendering trade, and that's why the African Continental Free Trade Area was adopted. So it is an engine of growth, and through it we'd like the private sector to embrace it, to participate in it, because what it does, it gives the African continent an opportunity to integrate. And it gives business people the opportunity to see the 1.4 billion people market on our continent and a GDP of the entire continent adding up to $3.4 trillion. Now, with this agreement, we're then able to get the private sector working with the public sector to embark on meaningful projects such as infrastructure, because for trade to have meaning and to happen on our continent, infrastructure projects must be embarked upon. Roads must be built. Our airlines must work properly. Our ports must work properly. Our rail network must work properly. And this is where the private sector can then come and partner with the public sector, where we can work together. And the public sector is keen, having established or inaugurated the African Continental Free Trade Area, in integrating the continent. I saw the integration of the continent during COVID-19.
That was South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking to delegates at the Africa CEO Forum, which is currently underway in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire.
On the Move is next after Africa Rise and Shine here on Channel Africa. And Palisa Tao joins us in studio to tell us what to expect. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys?
We are good.
Doing good as well. All right. Taking a look at the conversations of today. Today we're navigating the choice to be child-free. And I know more and more people, especially women, are choosing to be child-free. And they're getting a lot of backlash for that. So we're going to navigating that space. Talking to clinical psychologist Charity Mkone, as well as Jean-Marc Groenewald, who himself and his wife made a choice to not have children. So we're going to be unpacking that in the first hour of the show.
Some people are going to be out there and saying, "Hi, that is un-African."
I love that you got a male's perspective as well.
Yeah.
Jean is
Yes.
assuming a guy, right?
Right, yes, a man with his wife, and they made a choice together to not have children. So I love that. It's one of my favorite conversations, actually.
Nice.
Brilliant.
Then we go in the cubicle, speaking about all the things that are happening in the workplace. And today we're speaking about what leadership looks like for introverts. Because it's usually something that's associated with assertiveness and a command of presence. But that doesn't mean that introverts can't be leaders. So we'll be unpacking what that looks like. And in the final hour of the show, in our Money Matters feature, we'll be unpacking the subtle or not so subtle signs that your trusted and loved ones might be exploiting your finances through love and loyalty.
Okay.
Gosh, that's
Are we talking
fascinating.
black text as well?
Yeah, that can go hand in hand with all of that. So friends, family, partners, romantic, could be anybody.
I'm really intrigued by that first conversation, because what we're seeing statistically is that people are getting married much later as a start, and people are not getting married at all as well. So it seems to be another part of that whole shift, isn't it? I'm going to be listening to that.
I think we're going to end up changing the term traditional family.
Yes.
Because
what is that now?
Yeah, it's completely different. I mean,
very
it's
interesting.
What is it even, actually, by definition anymore?
Yeah.
Wow. Blended.
All right, we'll be back tomorrow with you here on Rise and Shine, 6 till 9.
Yeah.
So it's goodbye for now from me, Asanda Beda.
And from me, Peter Ndoro. Have an awesome day. Peace. We're out.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Top stories. A South African civic organisation AfriForum distances itself from 49 white Afrikaners who left for the US and a well-known Palestinian photojournalist killed in Gaza. Good morning. With the decision of the 49 white Afrikaners who left South Africa to acquire refugee status in the United States. 49 Afrikaners travelled to the US over the weekend after taking up US President Donald Trump's offer to move over as refugees. Kriel says AfriForum respects the decision of those individuals. He says AfriForum is determined to continue together with other institutions of the Solidarity Movement to help create a future for Afrikaners in South Africa.
It's not our decision. It's a personal decision by everybody for themselves. The decision we've taken as AfriForum is that the only place where Afrikaners can survive as a cultural community is in South Africa. The reason being we are not Dutch, Germans, French anymore. Those people that came here centuries ago became a new people, the Afrikaners, and to survive as a cultural community, you need to have an Afrikaans cultural environment.
South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority has announced that it will appeal the Gqeberha High Court judgment in which Nigerian television